Penguin Random House Audio presents Mr. Texas, a novel by Lawrence Wright. Read for you by Stephen Weber. With acknowledgments read by the author. Note to listeners: stay tuned after the credits to hear full editions of all the music written for Mr. Texas.
To Ann Close. That's a wrap.
Chapter 1. A long cloud of dust trailed the black sedan racing down a caliche road toward the Walter Dunn spread. The horizon was dark, and the mesquite trees bent in the north wind, waving at Mexico. A few idle pump jacks were rusting amid the creosote bushes. A slight rise lay just ahead, revealing a low-slung adobe wall encompassing the graveyard. The land was hard, dry, used up. The people who lived in these parts were also hard. Their ancestors settled on giant claims back when there was grass enough for cattle, but generation after generation had seen it wither away. Those who remained on the land were marooned by history. There were no cities within hundreds of miles. The remaining towns were little more than hamlets, with half the buildings evacuated like old movie sets. An occasional gas station marked the intersection of county roads, but it was likely abandoned so long ago that the company it represented was extinct as well. You could go for days without seeing another human being, or even hearing your own voice until you had reason to speak. Airliners streaked across the high sky, and from that distant vantage, passengers enjoying their cocktails might look down and think, "Geez, what a huge, empty, totally worthless country." And they'd go back to their crossword. You could almost hear the shades snapping shut as they jetted by. The service was already underway when L.D. Sparks parked his Lincoln at the end of a line of pickups and slipped into the crowd of mourners, a respectable turnout, befitting the prominence of the decedent. Some men were in suits, but most wore dress jeans and shirts with pearl snap buttons, the women in somber dresses purchased from catalogs that reached to their Sunday boots. Their faces were lean and leathery and strongly formed, marked by the sun, faces you rarely saw in the soft suburbs, more like old family photographs, ancestral in nature, plain and unprettified, and not to be trifled with. It was the hands that you finally noticed, chapped and red and laced with veins like braided rope, palms as hard as oak. Some men could barely make a fist, and when you shook it was like grasping a brick. They were scarred from accidents and animal bites, knuckles broken by obstreperous equipment. Some were missing digits. You couldn't live in these parts without getting hurt. Compared to a lot of folks, Walter Dunn passed into the next world with enviable ease, his heart having failed to keep the beat. The tent over the grave bucked and billowed in the wind. Anywhere else you'd think it was about to rain, but there was no water in the approaching storm, a blue norther, bringing nothing but cold and trouble. The pastor, gray-bearded with the eyes of a benevolent fanatic, was leading a hymn, and because nearly everybody went to the same Church of Christ in Fort Davis, they joined expertly in the a cappella singing, "Yonder, yonder, yonder in the great beyond, peace and love await, beyond the pearly gate, over yonder in the great beyond." L.D. hadn't been to church since the Nixon administration, but the song found its way back into his mouth as easily as if he had been singing it that very morning. The familiar harmonies awakened memories, not altogether unpleasant, of his long-forsaken youthful piety, enforced by family and community, and really everyone he knew. But look at him now, the silver-haired cynic in a gray western-cut suit and handmade boots, tall, slender, suave, part of the scene and apart from it, a man who knew exactly where he ought to be, on top of the world and in control. Governor Abbott was there and said a few kind words of the sort that might be said of anyone not convicted of a felony. The deceased and the governor represented different parties, but LD thought it a smart move on Abbott's part to plant a flag in the district, which had been solidly Democratic since the Civil War. But after Trump, the chickens were out of the coop. At least, LD hoped so. The governor slyly called Walter a friend and occasional ally, overlooking votes that might be inconvenient to recall in the face of the fierce widow in the front row with the folded flag of Texas in her lap. Walter might be dead, but his influence lingered. After the eulogies, there must have been 7 or 8 of them, all on the same themes: good family man, selfless public servant, little truth in any of it. LD got in line to toss a few desiccated clods into Walter's grave. He noticed old Ben Fortson hobbling in his direction, so he moved off a bit to avoid him, but Ben would not be dodged. My, oh my, oh my. Looky who's here, Ben said, his eyes alight with deviltry. Good day to you, Judge. You come all this way for Walter Dunn? He was a good man. True or not, he's no use to you now, Ben observed. You're a harsh old bastard, Ben. Ben's laugh detoured into a dry cough. I seen you casting your eyes over this lot, he said when he recovered. I might have been, LD allowed. What's it to you? Well, Walter's not even in the ground, and you're shopping for his replacement. Not shopping. Poking around, like. Waste your time. Ben spat into the dust, the only moisture the soil had experienced in months. You ought to run over to Alpine, talk to the mayor. He's got an appetite for higher office, they tell me. Sees himself as governor one day. He's about as likely to get a blowjob from the Queen of England. LD indicated a portly man with slicked-back hair, dyed black, and jowls like a Great Dane. What about Morales? Big family, Chamber of Commerce, cartel money, Ben said under his breath. A prosperous-looking figure was shaking hands with everybody in reach. That would be who? LD asked. Charlie Ford owns the bank in Marfa. Beats his wife. LD sighed. He had never expected this to be easy, especially out here in ground zero of nowhere. These people didn't seem entirely real to him, more like actors with strong features, rounded up and dressed appropriately for a scene in which LD discovers the next Ronald Reagan. How likely was that? And they certainly felt the same about him, a stock character from the big city, in a gray Italian suit who happens to drop in, a visit to the zoo. He even had the pocket square, a true dude. A female would be nice, he said. Keep up with the times. Valerie Nightingale, Ben said, practically dancing a jig. County commissioner, veteran, helicopter pilot in Afghanistan. Tough, smart, everything you dream of. You're making me hard, said LD. Only one problem. What's that? She's not of your tribe, and she's going to announce next week. LD nodded as if he knew all about Valerie Nightingale. He didn't like to lag behind the rumor mill, especially when it was bad news. He didn't like it at all. Nobody's unbeatable, he said irritably. Just need the right candidate, someone young, popular, and smart. Smart enough to let you do his thinking for him. Merely helping the democratic process along, said LD, studying his nails, which were perfect. Raping virgins, more like it, said Ben, and at a funeral to boot. Just then the norther hit with a wallop of wind, blowing hats off half the men who chased through the gravestones after their tumbling Stetsons. The same wind coursed through the parking lot of the auction house in Fort Stockton as Sonny Lamb unloaded 15 heifers into the livestock pens. They were polled Herefords, a breed valued for its toughness, fertility, and ability to survive on native grasses. But they were also, in Sonny's opinion, supremely handsome animals, with immense, soulful eyes and sweet dispositions, slow-moving and unruffable.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?